So the topic for today's video is finger drumming, using these guys to play drums on these guys. Now, I have never done a finger drumming tutorial before. The reason behind that is because really I didn't think that I was that good at it. I sort of know enough to get me by, but really there are guys on YouTube with a ton more experience than me, so I guess that's the video there. Just go check out somebody else. Alright, all jokes aside, I do have some skills in finger drumming, and over my time on YouTube I've had a bunch of people ask me to do a tutorial on it, so I figured I could at least teach you what I know, and hopefully that will be enough to get you by, or at least enough to get you started. But if you do want to check out some more advanced stuff, I'll leave links in the description to other dudes on YouTube who are really good at this stuff. Some of them have free tutorials on their YouTube channels, and others offer one-on-one classes that you can sign up for. But yeah, all of that in the description. So before we just jump straight into it, I wanted to tell you a bit about my journey learning how to do all of this. So some of the first guys I saw doing this kind of stuff that really inspired me to give it a go was Jeremy Ellis and Justin Aswell. Now these guys both have just mind-blowing skills, but one of the other things that attracted me to their videos was they were both, as with a lot of us, early adopters of machine. Now these guys both have really different styles. Jeremy Ellis comes from being a classically trained keyboard player, whereas Justin Aswell was a seasoned MPC veteran. So even though both of these guys really inspired me, their styles were just a bit too complex for me to get started with. So the first people I found on YouTube with styles that I thought I could try myself were guys like DJ Exile, and Memorex.
Turn the music up in the headphones.
Now, Memorex style has changed in more recent years, but when I first saw his stuff, him and Exile both had a pretty similar style. Now they both used their dominant hand to do basically all of their drumming, leaving their other hand free to add in extras. Generally samples like melodic samples, chords, but sometimes just cymbals, things like that. But the thing that I picked up on was that the placement of their drums went as so: a kick drum, a hi-hat, a snare. And the way that they played was their hand would just be bouncing on this hi-hat, and then they would kind of rock back and forth to play their kicks and snares. So that's how I played for a long time. Obviously you can double time the hi-hats. You can play faster or slower, but basically that's it. Now I probably would have kept up with this pad layout except for one thing. So when you go to load up a machine kit, so I've just loaded up a kit, the layout of the drums always goes kick, snare, hat. So for me that meant that every time I loaded up a new kit I would have to swap over the hi-hat and the snare before I could start doing anything. With my style of making beats, I'll generally chop up a sample and then start looking for drums. Now when you're going through kit after kit, drum sound after drum sound, that small change really starts to add up, and it got irritating. So I decided I would just relearn how to play with the hi-hat being there and the snare being there. So it was really the machine layout that got me to change that up. The next thing that you would want to do at this point would be to add a second hand in. These can only get so complex with just the one hand doing all of your drums. And so that's what I did. Now, the simplest way to go about this is your right hand or your dominant hand does exactly the same thing as it was doing before. and then your left hand or your non-dominant hand, it will play in between each one of those beats. For example, if I duplicate this hi-hat over, now I've got two hi-hats playing, we can do something like this. Now that doesn't seem very complicated, but it opens up a lot in terms of what you can do with drum patterns. It also means that you can start adding or layering melodic samples on top of what you're playing. So like I said, that was my journey of how I got to this point, but it hasn't felt like much of a tutorial. So I'm gonna change up this camera angle and show you a little bit more closely what I'm actually doing here. Okay, alright, so the first style I showed you, we're just using the one hand, 3 fingers, we've got kick, hat, and snare. And like I said, we're just using this middle finger, just our whole hand bouncing up and down, playing 16ths, playing 8ths, whatever you feel. And then our hand is rocking back and forth to play the kick and the snare. Now it will be up to you to decide if this is the pad layout that you want to go with, but whichever style you choose, you really want to start off just playing simple. I'm going to quickly go back to my preferred pad layout. So all we're doing is playing the kick on the first and the third beat, the snare on the second and the fourth beat, and the hat on every beat and every half beat, which sounds something like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Okay, so the next thing I talked about was adding in your second hand, and I showed you before that I duplicated this hi-hat sound over here, and you can play anything like this. Now, the reason behind doing something like this is it allows you to play much faster than just playing with one hand. It also allows you to play drums on the offbeats. So before we were just doing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and it allows you to more easily play your kicks and snares on those offbeats. Now, finally, I want to talk about one more style of finger drumming that I didn't really touch on because I don't really do it. And this method involves drumming more like an actual drummer would play. So instead of using one hand to play multiple drums, you would say use your right hand just to play the hats and your left hand to play the kick and the snare. Now, some of the guys who do this who are really good at it are people like Beats by J Black. And guys like David Hayes. Now, the final thing that I wanted to talk about was, it's kind of a mixed up style and I don't really know how to describe it except that where before this rhythm was like constant and then this hand would just play in between those notes. But there is a style that doesn't have that constant. So in this style, instead of this hand just playing in between these notes, my left hand sort of just jumps in wherever is necessary. Alright, well, that's basically me done. Like I said at the start, like, I don't think I'm the greatest finger drummer, so don't go blasting me in the comments. But I do hope this video helped you get started, or showed you a few tips, or even just inspired you to check out someone else to learn how to do this properly. I'd like to give a shout out to the homies Datsun, Gnarly, and especially Quest for Groove. If you want to learn how to do this stuff, Quest for Groove is a great place to start. And like I said, links in the description to all of these people. But yeah, I think that's it from me, so I'll see you guys next time.